Let's get started. So to start off, this is all about Visual Studio features. In particular, we're going to be talking about web development features for Visual Studio 2010. At the point when we published this talk, we weren't allowed to just refer to the product name of Visual Studio 2010, so that's why the title is this way right now. I want to start off with thanking everyone for being here. I realize it's 5:15, and you guys have had a long day since 8:30 in the morning of listening to sessions. So I hope we can make this fun for you guys and show you and get you excited about what's going to be new in terms of development tooling for the web. My name is Jeff King. I'm a program manager with the Visual Studio team. And if you've seen my blog post or talked with me before, I worked on JScript, the HTML editor. I also used to work on the design view and a lot of the different components as part of the Visual Web Developer Visual Studio product. So to begin, we want to take a look at VS 2010 and give you guys the first look this is the first time we're publicly disclosing all of the features. But to really give context, I like to actually take a look back at the past year and see where we are. And I think that really helps set the picture for what 2010 is about. So we started with Visual Studio 2008. Believe it or not, it's been less than a year. It's been basically 11 months and a week since we released Visual Studio 2008. And been a pretty short time since then. And with 2008, we introduced a lot of new features. We started off with multiple framework targeting. So you can actually use 2008 to target your 2.0 servers, your 3.0 servers, or 3.5. So you can build any sort of app with the same version of VS. And this is great because you can always leverage all the new features of Visual Studio while not having to install multiple different versions on your machine, depending on which framework you're targeting. We also introduced a new design view, and this was brand new. And this really helped render your cutting-edge standards-compliant pages in a more accurate way. Along with the new design view, we also had this new split view, and allows you to see your markup and your preview at the same time. And we also have a lot of, as you can see in the picture here, we have visual margins and padding, visual positioning, a lot of things to help you give you a WYSIWYG editing experience over your page that's much more friendly. We talked about CSS rendering. We also introduced CSS tooling. And I don't know how many of you guys use it out there, but we have 3 new task panes in 2008 that allow you to look at the CSS style cascade, which isn't always immediately obvious why your page looks a certain way given the way CSS works. We also have managed imply styles, which allows you to take large amounts of styles across your site and sort of give one common view, give previews for them, and also tell you where to put the files. A couple other features that perhaps aren't as easy to show you a screenshot of. We introduced JavaScript IntelliSense in 2008. And this was a great feature to help you get richer AJAX development experiences. Likewise, we also introduced validation, a simplified debugging experience, and where you didn't have to look for different tool windows. You didn't have to fire up IE to turn on the IE debugger to get things right. And we also have design view support for AJAX extenders, which was a cool AJAX feature. But you can actually, without knowing how to write JavaScript, you can actually go to design view, flip open the panel, and add and remove different extenders to your controls. Next up, we have Service Pack 1 for VS 2008. And this was only released less than 3 months ago. And with this, we actually continued our innovation new features with a couple new things. We had web application projects and class libraries for the Express queue. And this was a really big change because for the first time, you can actually do MVC projects in Express. You can do proper web application development where you have your class library and your website as 2 separate entities. And all the stuff that you can actually do on a free product. So this is pretty groundbreaking. Likewise, we continued our AJAX and JavaScript investments with JavaScript formatting. And we also brought back something we lost with the new design view that a lot of people requested, which was multiple control selection. Select multiple controls. You can do alignment, spacing on them. You can also set properties across multiple controls also. Pretty great way of, most of the time you're going to be dealing with a lot of controls on screen, and this is a great thing to have back into the product for SB1. A couple more things. We've been working on performance all the way through. You're going to notice with SB1 that typing is a lot more improved, and we're continuing to work on that. We also brought back classic ASP IntelliSense. When we upgraded our JavaScript IntelliSense engine, the VB script engine actually kind of broke along with it, and with SB1 we had the time to get that functionality back up to speed. Integration for dynamic data, SQL Server 2008. And a little known fact, but for JavaScript paths, you're actually able to put an HTTP value inside the path, and we'll actually be able to retrieve the files. So this way you don't if you download your files off a live server and your server actually you don't have the files locally, you can still get JavaScript IntelliSense everything for those files. And another performance work, which was a faster switch in design view. So we've seen a lot of, within the past year, we've seen a lot of new features come out, and our team has really been hard at work on trying to make web development better for everyone. Even along the sides, we've had the Silverlight tooling, we've had MVC tooling, and different out-of-band releases that continue to add on top of VS. But really, the focus today is really where we want to go looking forward. And with looking forward, our team has actually spent about the last year and a half planning for the Visual Studio 2010 product, and we've actually been working really hard on trying to bring a lot more features and a lot more practical value for everyone in the room. So we're going to categorize the conversation in just 4 major areas today. We talk about increased investments in design view. We're really focusing back on the basics now, which is we realize that no matter what kind of visual editor feature we add or any sort of wizard we add, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, everyone's going to be writing some sort of code in a very piecemeal fashion, right? No matter how many wizards or aids you have, you're always going to be writing code with your bare hands. And we really wanted to make that experience better. So we put a lot of effort into HTML editing, and we also looked at JavaScript editing to make the experiences better there. And lastly, we decided to tackle a fairly large problem area, which is the whole question about getting your web app from location A to location B. And location A could be your dev box, and location B is oftentimes a hosted server, which you pay $20 a month to have a site hosted, or perhaps you own your own server farm, or perhaps you're just pushing the staging and someone else pushes it to the farm. Either way, we've been looking at ways to better get your app from one place to another and keep them working. So we're going to start with design view. Part of our goal with design view for this release is to continue our investment and really polishing off the corners of what we introduced last time around. One of the things I'm happy to announce is that we now near 99%, we support 99% of the CSS 2.1 selector spec. And in particular, we're looking at attribute selectors. And for those of you that don't dabble in CSS all the time, attribute selectors allow you to write CSS rules that match not only the tag name or the class name or the ID, but you can also pick tags that have certain attributes applied to them. For example, is any title that has any header that has the title attribute set, or you can actually be really picky and select certain attributes that have certain values assigned to them. So it's a lot more powerful way of selecting things, and all the major browsers, and now with IE8 and IE7, they all support a lot of these new selectors. Along with that, if you're doing development for multiple different languages, this is a CSS construct that helps you select based on what language certain tags have. One really interesting use of this is you can actually have multiple regions on your page depending on which language you want to show, and you can use your CSS style sheet to show that. And once again, now that design view understands what all the terminology means, you're able to get better live previews. And in a nutshell, basically, your pages look like what you expect them to look like more often. A few more CSS selectors we added. We now support first child, which is to pick the first element out of a group rather than selecting all of them. You can also inherit different values. This was always there, and now we actually respect that. You can set your border colors to transparent, and might seem like a really minor thing, but a lot of people were actually having designs that didn't look quite right because they expected the border color to look a certain way. This last one's actually kind of cool. We actually fixed the way we parse invalid rules. And you're probably thinking, why in the world would you care about parsing an invalid rule correctly? Well, it turns out that a lot of style sheets out there that if you're not the CSS guru yourself, you may download style sheets from someone else, fixes from other people, or if you download site templates, they may contain designs that contain selectors that are actually purposely written wrong to get the correct behavior in different browsers. So different browsers will parse things in a different way, and you may leverage invalid selectors to get the right behavior. Now we'll actually parse a selector such as body, comma, comma, p. We'll actually throw that entire rule out, which is the correct behavior according to spec, as opposed to rationalizing it in some other way. So in a nutshell, this is from the CSS 2.1 page. And these are all the selectors. And we basically have support everything on this page. And the only thing we actually don't do is first letter and first line. Two smaller things. And, but in a nutshell, I think most everything is supported and means better looking pages for you guys. Along with that, we actually looked at rendering improvements. I'm just going to look at one example here. And this is the ACID 1 test. And ACID 1, for those of you that don't know, is sort of a CSS litmus test for how well your browser is doing with regards to standards compliance. If the page looks funny, then basically there's something wrong with the browser. You can likewise use the same page to test out design views with different products too. This is ACID 1 in Internet Explorer 7, and this is the way it's supposed to look. This is kind of cool. This is the way it looks in VS 2008. In this example, we didn't support styling of the body and the body element correctly, so things kind of exploded. And you can imagine your page exploding this way too, and you're probably pretty frustrated why it doesn't look right. But I'm glad to say that at least for this particular case, 2010 looks pretty much exactly like IE7. So this was 2008, this was IE7, and you can see it looks a lot more similar. So in general, we really want to make more investments in making pages look more accurate. Another feature that we're looking at coming down the pipeline is the ability to switch between design time and runtime CSS style sheets. So for certain controls where you don't know what the style sheet as its design time, or if your style sheet is served up dynamically, we're able to give you an option to fall back on something that is you can definitely load off your page and not have to worry about processing. Okay. So the next major area I'd like to talk about is HTML authoring. And we actually have a lot of really fun stuff here. With all the features combined that we're going to be showing you in the next half hour, I actually think markup editing, at least for myself, has been a lot more enjoyable. And I actually enjoyed doing it a lot more than I did in the past. And I'm hoping as we walk through the features, we can prove that point to you. So today we're announcing the availability of HTML snippets for Visual Studio 2010. And I think some of you in this room will already be convinced that snippets is the right way to go. For those of you that are already using the snippets feature as part of C#, VB, or XML. And I think there's a lot of really cool things you can do with snippets. And perhaps the best way to characterize the benefits of snippets for those of you that actually haven't used snippets before is to really look at what you're doing all day. And so what I have here is I actually took a random page and I parsed out all the different tokens that are on the page, angle brackets, the words, and I really wanted to find out what you're typing all day. Like, what do you spend your time doing all the time? And I realized, and I put it in this app called Wordle, which actually does sort of a word cloud. It has nothing to do with cloud computing. It just puts your words into a visual page, and the bigger ones are the ones you type more often, and the smaller ones are the ones that aren't as big of a deal. And you can see here that most of the time you're typing all these characters that have non-critical meaning to your page. The angle bracket is really nice. It's sort of a markupism to help you surround something, but it really isn't the key defining characteristic of your page. Let's take a look at a couple things here. And I'm actually going to, if you take a look at the angle brackets, the equals, and the quotes, you're always actually lifting your hands up and doing shift and taking your hands off the home row. And if you take a look at your hand when you're typing HTML really fast, it's like finger gymnastics, right? You're basically, your fingers are jumping back and forth from key to key, and you can't really get into the flow of what you want to do. How many of you guys like typing run at server? Yeah, right. So although we haven't quite been able to remove that from the runtime, I think we have a pretty good solution coming up for how to really get this typing out of the way for you at design time. Also, ASP colon is something that nearly every tag has, but you still have to type it over and over again. And a couple other things. There's always tags that you want to type together with another tag, such as a content template for update panel. How many times have you seen an update panel without the content template tag? Probably not very often unless your site doesn't run. So here's a summary of all the different things you're typing all the time, and we're going to see how we can actually remove some of this tedium from your life. So let's go ahead and flip over to a demo. So what I have here is Visual Studio 2010, and this is a private build, not the CDP that you guys have, because this is the latest and greatest stuff. I actually patched this build just a few hours ago, so this is the fresh and latest bits coming from Redmond. And what I'd like to do is show you how the snippet feature works for a quick overview for those that haven't seen it. First of all, want to show you the Code Snippets Manager. And in the box of VS 2010, we're going to be shipping over 200 snippets in the box. So this means that you don't have to write anything yourself, although you can extend it whenever you want. But we have all the basic scenarios covered for all the snippets that you might like to use. And this dialog is a convenient manager for all the snippets between all the different languages. Oops. Let me add something real quick. So one of the things we're going to show is how to insert a snippet, and there's a couple ways you can do it. There's 3 ways. You can actually right-click anywhere on the page, and there's context menu items for insert snippet and surround with. Likewise, there's keyboard shortcuts for those 2 commands also. One of my favorite ways for inserting snippets is actually directly through IntelliSense, and we're actually one of the few tools that actually has this type of code generation behavior directly integrated with IntelliSense. So a simple example will be a table. And as you can see, I can type table. And what we have here, if you take a look at the icons, is the ability to have, you're going to see these little pieces of paper stuck to the different icons. And they actually have new meaning now. So for something like text area where we don't have a snippet, you just see a tag. For something like text box, which is abbreviated as TB, we actually just show you a snippet. This is not a valid tag, but it is actually a valid snippet. And for something that both serves as a tag name and a snippet, we actually have an icon that sort of merges both. And this is sort of a unique improvement that we actually put above and beyond the existing snippets feature to allow you to know, hey, which things are proper to type as part of the schema, and also which things are actually you can only use as a snippet. So let's take a quick look at the things you can do. That's how you would insert a table. If you want to use it, say you want a button, that's all you have to do to insert a button. Notice that we actually pre-populate some of the common attributes for you. Text is actually normally part of the button behavior, but you have to type it yourself all the time. Run at servers inserted for you. For tags that don't have run at server, we have a snippet for that too, and you can actually type run at server, and we'll complete the rest for you. So great news for all the lazy people out there. A lot less typing for you. I hope you guys like this feature. So, but there's more to show you. So snippets allows you to generate large amounts of code really quickly. What if you want to delete large amounts of code, right? You're always doing sort of this selection game where you're trying to get the mouse cursor at the right point, and you know, when you're really in a rush, let's say preparing a demo right before at 5:15, you really want a faster way to get at and remove tags. So we're introducing concept of structural selection, which is a really simple concept that you probably already know. It's the concept of triple clicking, being able to select entire logical sections of tags. And this is a really cool feature because you can, if you have, oh, someone like that? And so I hope you guys are having fun. Let's say you have class equals foo bar, and you want to clear this out. You want to select foo, you can select bar. You can triple click to select foo and bar and clear out the entire value at the same time. You can triple click class to select the entire attribute and delete that. And likewise, you can select the entire table, delete that. Or if you want to clear out the contents in something, you can actually triple click inside the content area and you can delete it that way. So really powerful, quick ways of generating and deleting code. Next question is how many people, who in this room can recite the XHTML 1.1 strict doc type tag? Bertrand works for Microsoft, so he doesn't count. This guy's the JavaScript guy, and he's a total nerd, yeah. So for the rest of you guys normal out there, all you have to do now is type X, and we have snippets for all the different document types. And so if you want to get rid of that one, I can just triple click here, and I can get rid of that. So now we're in strict document mode. How many of you guys have struggled to look up on MSDN what the register tag is? So we now have type prefixes. So you can go ahead and insert your custom controls. I'm enjoying this. So one of my favorite ones is I really hate typing script tags. So tab will give you the JavaScript script tag. What if you want to reference something? Tab will give you that. And now you can just pick a site here. And let's go ahead and remove all this. Likewise, you can do CSS. Style. You can insert styles in that way. So it actually works in plenty of ways. One great way of doing this is you can do script run at servers. And we're perfectly integrated with the managed languages to where you can actually type a property and you can actually get snippets, C# snippets or VB snippets inside of your markup snippets. So it's well integrated across the board. The last thing I want to show you is, let's say we want to create a site here. Let me just delete the inside and title. PDC. One really great feature we have is some snippets are actually done by their full control name. We've picked a few, like 2 of them, just to experiment with what it's like to just have a shortcut key, like TB for text box. One really great thing is that you can actually, now here's a long one to type, required field validator. Now if you take a look here, not only did it actually fill in error message for you, which you probably always want, control to validate, look at the value for control to validate. It actually knows there's a relationship between the 2 controls, saves you the typing of the 2 different text boxes back and forth. It's actually a pretty simple feature. It just looks for whatever text box, whatever control is above your current control, so we're not trying to be too smart. And currently in this build right now, if you don't have a control above there, we'll actually crash. So we'll get that fixed. So don't ask me to type that. Great, and the very last thing is, let's say you have everything you wanted, and darn, what if you wanted to add another tag to surround it, right? Well, you can go ahead and right-click and do surround with. And let's say we want to put it in a multi-view. And like that, you can surround your tags as much as you want. You can surround the multi-view in a table. And likewise, you can build your websites inside out for the first time ever. So I hope you guys like that. So for those of you that are not clapping right now, you're probably thinking, well, this is all fun and games, but what does it really mean to me? And the real goal of the whole is not to just introduce new features. We're actually trying to make this whole task of web development a lot faster. And we really want to, help you develop at the speed that you can think, and which means, at least twice as fast as how you can work right now. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to see, to measure that. Well, how do you measure that? Well, let me introduce the timer tool. So this tool, written in WPF, will give you a 59-second countdown, and that's how much time I have to type. And it will give me a keystroke counter. So as soon as I start typing, it actually will tell me how many keystrokes I've typed. If I have to hold Shift, like I'm pressing Shift right now, and no, I don't want sticky keys, it'll actually count as 2, because if you have to hold Shift in something, it's twice as much typing, right? And so with that, I actually just have a few seconds to prove to you how much time it takes today. So with that, let's get started, and we're going to do the old way first. And here we go.
Just because I'm losing doesn't mean I'm lost. Doesn't mean I'll stop. Doesn't mean I'm across. Just because I'm hurting doesn't mean I'm hurt.
Running out of time here, so I gotta go
Doesn't
quickly.
mean I didn't get what I deserve. No better, no worse.
This is real. I'm not faking it.
I just got lost.
Oh, the music stopped. Okay. So that's how much I typed with 255 keystrokes in the order of a minute. And I really didn't get much done. And let's see how many more lines. So this is 6 lines. So let's go here and clear the contents of the form and reset the timer. And let's get started with how to do this the new way. So let's take a look at the results. So we have, gosh, this is way more than 6 lines of code. I don't even know how much this is. We have everything perfectly wired up. And let me see if this page runs. And we had 130 something keystrokes. So it's like about half the amount of keystrokes. And if you look at the time, we did 40 seconds. We did twice or 3 times as much we did. So it's truly evidence that as long as your mind can keep on feeding stuff into the editor, you can really work 4 times as fast as you currently can. And we really hope that this feature will have a practical meaning to you rather than a lot of the pie in the sky ideas. It really hits at home at what you're doing right now. The one last thing I'm going to show you for this feature is, and by the way, the page is running. The question always comes, hey, can I add my own snippets? And I want to show you that it's actually really easy to do that. We're going to go into, basically what you do is you have a snippets directory, and inside the snippets directory for Visual Studio is where you can actually look at all the snippets. And what we're actually going to do is you can write one from scratch, but that's the hard way. And let me give you a little secret. The easy way is to go ahead and copy and paste an existing snippet and tweak it to how you like. Rather than go through that whole exercise, basically all you have to do is copy and paste. And you can double click these in Visual Studio. And they're really simple. Basically, this is what you wanted to insert. And there's a couple tokens. You give it a shortcut, and you just fill in a couple fields. And all you have to do is take the finished file, drop it into, there's a My Documents folder, or there's a system-wide folder like where I am right now. The snippets show up. You don't need to reboot VS, and this goes with all the different languages. And you can always copy and paste a whole bunch of snippets in. As you move from machine to machine, they light up right away, so they're really easy to use. Okay. So next area I'd like to talk about is jQuery. How many people use jQuery out there? All right, quite a few. As you know, just last month, we announced a partnership with Microsoft and jQuery. And what this partnership means is that Microsoft not only you can actually call the support line and we'll give you support on jQuery, which this is a complete first because when was the last time you called Microsoft for support on an open source project, right? We're also shipping jQuery in the box with Visual Studio and also with out-of-band projects like MVC that you can download on Coplex today. What people really wanted was a better way to write jQuery, and we've been working with John Ressig, actually, of jQuery to really bring about a better experience for that. Let me give you a quick overview. We're introducing a new extension called VSDoc, and VSDoc is basically a documentation file that you feed to IntelliSense, and IntelliSense, it basically gives you better IntelliSense off that file. What I have here is really just the plain jQuery file, and I want to emphasize that we actually don't modify the meaning of the code. We just take large empty chunks of the code like that, and we go ahead and fill them in with XML doc comments. XML doc comments are like the C# and VB type doc comments, and they're able to be read by Visual Studio. And once you drop this into your file, and you can grab this starting today. Today is the first day we had it up from code.jQuery.com. And once you grab it from the file, from that server, you can actually get IntelliSense that looks something like this, to where you can start a jQuery expression, and you can chain, and you can chain, and you can get really rich IntelliSense all the way down the chain, no pun intended. And this really hopefully will, at least for me, it saves me from having to go back to the docs.jQuery.com website to look up how everything works each time. So we hope that's pretty useful for you. One other thing that we're going to be releasing pretty shortly is a hotfix for Visual Studio 2008. So this is a hotfix for the version you have, hopefully right now, for all those people that are on 2008 and not 2005. One key thing is that right now, if you want to reference scripts using script tags for IntelliSense sake, you have to feed it the debug version or now the VSDoc version, as you see right here. The problem are these, because if you mess up and you deploy with a .debug statement, your performance on your website goes to 0. And if you deploy with certain documentation files, it probably won't even work anymore. And if you're like me, you forget to do that, and we really wanted to fix that. So with this hotfix that's coming out within this next month, hopefully within the week or two, we'll be able to, you just specify the regular file, and we'll be able to look up -vsdoc or -debug for you automatically. So you just type the regular sort of file name that you want to use to run, and we'll actually go look for the extensions on top of that. This is consistent with how the script manager works, and this is also consistent with how our / comments work. So today what we're going to take a look at for the first time is JScript IntelliSense 2.0, and this is the first feature where we're actually looking forward beyond 2008 and looking into 2010. First, I want to cover a few things that we currently do today, and there's something really special about our IntelliSense engine today, and it's both sort of an advantage and a disadvantage in a lot of ways. We're able to recognize dynamically created members, and as you know, JavaScript is not a statically typed language. It's a dynamically typed language, which means that you can actually change your types on the fly. Each line of code can affect the ways your type looks. Register class, for example, definitely has an effect on basically how things behave. And for this particular example, you can actually see that event args will actually respond to modifications and annotations you've made on top of the JavaScript library. We also have something that we introduced in the last version, which is the ability to relate different files together for IntelliSense sake. I hope a lot of you guys know about this already, but you're able to reference from JScript to JScript file, from ASP.NET file to JScript file, and vice versa. And you can also do script managers to different files. So it helps you link everything together. And also a basis for the jQuery documentations and what we're looking at moving forward is this ability to be able to read comments that have no runtime implication from your file and give you rich IntelliSense from that. And this is really the basis for a lot of our different features. So we've updated the architecture in IntelliSense 2.0. One of the top points of feedback was that we wanted faster updating times, so we're going to give you faster update times. XML comments work everywhere. We'll look into that in just a second. Be able to use any library, any code, anything you can throw at the engine you want. And along with that, some notion of error tolerance. So for faster updating, currently, how many people have noticed this status dialog in the bottom? Just a few hands. For those that didn't raise their hands, basically what happens is as you move from file to file, we actually detect changes and we have to update. And since we are able to recognize dynamic types, it's a more expensive of an operation. And what you're left with is this little status symbol on the very bottom, the status message. And what this says is, hey, basically, you're not getting the latest IntelliSense. Please wait until I'm done. And during that wait time, it's really frustrating because it's just enough to break your sense of concentration. I'm happy to show you that with the new version, we have significantly increased times for common libraries. These performance benchmarks were done on my demo laptop, which you're seeing me use over here. Definitely not a workhorse machine. So you're going to see a lot better times on your development boxes. Microsoft Ajax is twice as fast. And we're actually going to be able to get that even faster moving forward. These are just current live bits. jQuery these are milliseconds now. So jQuery is under 200 milliseconds, which is not even noticeable. Prototype is 4 times as fast. Dojo is 3 times as fast. YUI, for those of you that like using the Yahoo UI framework. This is along with the calendar control, by the way. It's 4 times as fast, down to under, it's about 400 milliseconds. EXEJS was a really cool example. They're a really big library, and they actually take more than, it's double the chart. So the bar goes way off the chart right now. It takes about 12 seconds to update. Apologize for that, for those of you that have to deal with that right now. It's under 2 seconds in the newest version, and we're hoping to get that even faster. Notice the red line, which is about a second, is about your threshold for noticing when things update. And what I want to point out is that all the red bars, which is VS 2010, they're all under a second, which means that you probably just won't notice anything updating as we move forward. XML documentation comments. One really interesting thing that I'm not sure if people noticed, and if you haven't noticed, you probably just thought it was broken, is that these comments only work in certain places. And this was an architectural limitation. So given the file on the left and a JavaScript file on the right, and these two files are related, and your comments are in your JavaScript file, and you want to see IntelliSense based on this file everywhere else, right? Currently, there's 3 different places you can see it, and currently we only do it on the file that's not in the current file. So basically, if you're typing within the JavaScript file, you're not going to see anything, just because we can't process it on the fly. So these 2 places, whether you're inside the function or you're right next to the function, doesn't matter where you are inside that file, you won't be able to see IntelliSense. And I'm glad to announce that we're able to support XML.comments, rich dynamic type support anywhere in the document. So it doesn't really matter where you are now, 100% consistent experience. And if you don't see IntelliSense, then something is definitely broken, and you should email me. Lastly, this one's a little bit more hard to explain, but because the way we process the scripts, if your script throws an exception or refers to a DOM type that's not there, or goes into infinite loop, Visual Studio will die, or at least IntelliSense will die. And we really wanted to make it so you never have to think about this again. And hopefully I can prove to you just a little bit that, hey, hopefully worrying about errors is a thing of the past, while maintaining all the dynamic IntelliSense. And I guarantee you no other tool out there, no other parser out there will be able to give you this type of IntelliSense without having to deal with errors like this also. You mind if I save the questions until the end? Okay, thanks. So here we're going to take a look again at Visual Studio 2010. This once again is the same internal build. And let's take a look at JavaScript. There you go. So first thing I want to demonstrate, how many people use Ajax? All right, so what I have here is a reference to Microsoft Ajax. And here's something you can never do before. The first thing you always do with any of your control applications is you want to register a namespace, right? So, and what we're able to do today is that if you take a close look here, it looks really subtle, but it's actually it's a really big deal. You pass in a string to a function. On the next line, we know that that string turned into 2 different objects chained together. And what you're really seeing is live dynamic IntelliSense based on the file. And it's something I'm pretty sure I've definitely never seen before, and I doubt no other tool out there can provide this type of IntelliSense. And you can type dot, and this shows up. So once again, you're taking string arguments. This is not something that can be parsed. You're actually changing it into an actual live objects that are bound together. Of course, there is an easier way to write a control these days. I'm going to rely on snippets again, and you can actually create an entire snippet from scratch like that. This is your, the higher level point is that snippets also work with JavaScript, and you can actually make your controls like that. You commit the snippet, real quick way of writing your JavaScript controls. Next thing I want to show you is that you can actually get some pretty cool IntelliSense inside also. So let's say you have an increment function. Actually, let me just start from scratch so it's a little bit more obvious. I can type a function foo, and let's say there's arguments a and b. And let's say we decorate it with a summary, and we have tool. You don't have to type these anymore also, thanks to snippets. This function does nothing. And we can do params. A is a string, and param b is a date. Sounds more interesting. And returns, we'll do a number. So like I was showing before, now when you call foo with whatever arguments you want to do, the dot returns IntelliSense correct to number, and this is in the next line. And inside the file, you're able to refer to A as a string. So these are all the members for string, and you're able to reference B as a date. And if you want to use a Boolean, you can actually do different objects. You can do whatever types you want to do too within the function. So you get XML documentation comments anywhere in the file you want now. One thing I also wanted to show was support for third-party libraries, and some really cool things you can do. Take Yahoo UI, for example, and what I can do is add the core framework. Debug version, and yahoo.namespace equals Jeff. Oops. I think it's just one. Oh, and then yahoo.jeff. And it doesn't matter what framework you use. This type of IntelliSense is rich, and it works everywhere in the same way. Likewise, I can do jQuery, so I can do a reference to my jQuery file. And I can select that, and I can get rich chaining IntelliSense off of jQuery also. So a real rich way to do all this type of IntelliSense. Likewise, you get the same experience in the debug files. So here you can actually have the jQuery script running also. That. You can get all the different IntelliSense. In the library, if I define a function, will you see this? Take a look here. You will see the function will you see this. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I showing you such a trivial thing? And this really gets down to the point of the error tolerance I was talking about. So I have a little file reference here called surprise.js. And I want to show you what's inside surprise.js. And just a hint, it's a surprise. So let's see what I have here. So our brilliant engineers have come up with a file that adds performance enhancements to any web page you want. So here we have throw in a new object. It doesn't even properly make an exception. We have calling a function on an undefined variable, which is clearly the worst thing you can ever possibly do. There's an infinite loop called while true. And then we have recursive functions where A calls B, and we didn't forget to call A at the very end. So this is probably the worst thing you can possibly throw at your website. But yet, if you look at all the different things, despite all the errors that we see, this is one of the first, evaluators in the world, basically, that's able to take a look at, well, you see this, parse that out, realize everything else is basically just something that's going to throw an error, and basically you end up with IntelliSense no matter what kind of file you feed it. So what this means to you guys is that it doesn't matter what library you throw it at, it doesn't matter how much you pay your programmers to write your libraries, whatever file you throw it at, you're always going to get a rich level of IntelliSense that's above and beyond anything else that's out there. So with that, I think hopefully I've proved to a point that JavaScript 2.0, JavaScript IntelliSense 2.0 will be something interesting for you guys to use. One thing we're looking at in the future, and I hear a few chuckles right there, we've actually been honestly working on something that's really highly requested, which is some sort of tool to help you tame large amounts of script. And if IntelliSense isn't good enough, people like to actually see it in a sort of a tree view. This is on a blue side because it's actually not demoable right now, but this is something we're working on. And I just wanted to let you know that we're looking at a document outline to help you navigate your files. It's also going to come with a quick find and filter box, so you can kind of type and filter down to what you want to see. You can sort, you can hide members, and overall, we actually give you a very logical view. And JavaScript is actually really difficult to get sort of a class view of your JavaScript applications. So this is a pretty unique thing in terms of helping you visualize your JavaScript. So that's JavaScript. So we've talked about design view, we've talked about HTML, we've talked about JavaScript, and now finally we're going to talk to one of our largest investments in VS 2010, and that is in the area of deployment. So deployment is a pain, and really to emphasize that, I think the best way is to just show you how this works. And let's go ahead and switch over to where we were right here. So in this build, I actually don't have any of the new deployment tools that we're going to be showing you today. Instead, what I have is a current file. And I wanted to emphasize that this is really just an empty web application, and there's still things that you can't do when you push up to the server. One thing that you want to do is you want to be able to publish the app. Today, we offer you a few different ways. Probably one of the most popular ones that people use is the publish web command. And for this, I actually have a live website, venuscloud.com, which curiously, unlike any other demo, this is something you can actually browse right now if you're interested in seeing what's up there. This is what it's like to upload a file to the server right now. And I have to type my password in every single time. It doesn't remember my password. And it's amazingly fast for those files. And let's go take a look at our server here. venuscloud.com, how to currently deploy. And what's the time right now? 6, just to prove that it's actually going up there. Do this one more time, publish again, and just in case you'd enjoy that last part, we're going to redo this again. Okay, so here we go. Control 5. So you can see your files moving up to the server. Not the fastest process in the world. Let's kind of take a look at what is currently wrong with deployment today. Once again, you have this dialog. Some of you are asking, well, what about the copy web dialog? This is a great tool, and we're going to support this well into the future. And but this tool actually only helps you move individual files around. It doesn't understand the intricacies of your application. We also have a few other tools. Web deployment projects is able to modify your web config, do really rich compilation options, but it's not able to actually move your files from one place to another. So we really didn't have a complete solution. And we really wanted to take published web and we wanted to take it to the next level in terms of functionality. One of the things that we're looking at today is the sum of all your files is not equal to your application. And what I mean by this is that getting your app to run from server to server, from machine to machine, is not just about copying files, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that go with your application. There's your IS config, which sits largely outside of the folders which you copy. Those can't be modified via an FTP operation. We also have GAC or COM components that sit on your machine. How do you get those from place to place in a reliable way? Most people are probably thinking, hey, I have some sort of script that does it, but you have to really update your script all the time. We have certificates that belong to the site. How do you move those around? Registry settings. The database, which is probably the largest part, that definitely does not sit within the folder unless your site is architected in a really interesting way. And the other issue is your desktop box. You don't want the same site copied perfectly. Assuming you could copy everything in full fidelity, you actually do want to make intentional changes across from site to site. When was the last time you uploaded debug equals true to your server? And that's what I just did 3 minutes ago when I uploaded. I had no choice but to upload debug equals true unless I remembered to change it every time. What about connection strings? This is definitely something that you want to change depending on where you are. And either fancier things like web service endpoints, you want to make sure that they align to staging, production, tests, and make sure those are changed the correct way. So with those problems in mind, I want to take a look at how we can solve those. And I just want to illustrate for the next 5 to 10 minutes about how to do this. And we're going to show you our option right now. And so given a similar site, what we want to do is push the site up. And these are also very, very fresh bits that are different than the ones I just updated. But in 2010, all you have to do is click on this button, and then you're done. So I guess we have a little bit more time than I thought. Let me explain what just happened in the background. We really wanted to make this thing as fast as one click, so we're calling it one-click publish. But really, what's going on in the background, and let's go ahead and take a look at what's underneath the hood, and also we'll take another look at the product to see what more we haven't seen yet. So back to slides. There's two components that support the foundation of what we call one-click publish. And these two things are MS Deploy, and there's something new that we call web XML document transforms. MS Deploy is a tool built by the IS team, and it's meant to be sort of an enterprise-level tool that helps you replicate applications, not just files, between different machines. You can sync it between your development and your staging server. You can also sync between one machine and 100 other machines in your farm. It's a pretty big level. It's a pretty big tool of how these things work. To start off, I think I want to illustrate how things work today. And really what you have is a whole bunch of computers, and they're wired up in some sort of way. And what we have today is FTP, and FTP really only addresses the problem of copying files around to different computers. So this is really fancy animation, but you can see it moves files all the way around. But it really doesn't talk to your application. It's really on the file system layer, and we recognize that that's really not enough to move things around. And the MS Deploy tool, the web deployment tool, also doesn't recognize that this is not enough. So given MS Deploy, what it actually does is it takes an application from one computer, and it's actually able to move this application across to different computers around the board, and actually able to copy all those different things that we just talked about and moving them from machine to machine. That solves the problem of being able to get your certificates, your IS configuration settings, your database, and everything from one computer to another. But it still doesn't solve the problem of getting differences specific to staging, production, your development box. So to that, we look to another new technology called XML document transforms. And this is a brand new technology we're announcing today. What it does is it enables you to have, for the first time, web configurations that are actually different for each of your locations. Whether it be debug, release, or staging, or whatever different string you can put into this dialog, you can have any number of different deployment modes that you can set your app into. So you can switch back and forth, and you never have to worry about manually making these changes again. So what does it do? It's really a combination of 3 files. It takes your source web config file. It takes a transform file, which is a diff of sorts, and it actually merges the two into a result right before you actually push your app to somewhere else. We have a new notation that's we hope to be simple and readable. It looks something like this. It's just a few lines of XML. This particular example will remove the debug attribute from your web config wherever it is inside. And everyone in the room must be thinking, well, why did you not use XSLT? And XSLT, of course, is a method of transforming XML documents from one form to another, which is sort of what we're doing right now. But what we really want to do is we really want to make a solution that's easy to remember, and we got a lot of feedback from people that XSLT is simply too difficult to memorize and also to use sort of in a repeated fashion. We also wanted something that kind of gave you sort of a diff level view of what it looks like. And we also wanted something that provided more error output. To give you a quick comparison between the two, here's the same thing in XSLT. A couple of different things to note. It's a lot more lines, and this is actually just one of the best case scenarios. The logic isn't very well encapsulated in XSLT. If you look at what the XSLT is doing, it's replicating all the nodes except for that last one, which is matching the compilation debug attribute. And it actually, because there's nothing inside that node, it actually doesn't replicate that. So at a glance, it really doesn't tell you the semantic meaning of your transformation. So with that, let's take a look at transformations in real life and how the one-click deployment feature works in real life. So going back to the demo box. The first thing I want to show is a couple new settings. There's a lot of things that you're able to configure now since you're able to move settings along with your website. What we've added here is, I'll take a look at the corner here. We actually added 2 new tabs over here. One is published, which is for your sites. One is published in SQL, which Vishal will be talking about in tomorrow's talk, and I'll point you guys into that direction later. What you also see is quite a few new settings for how to configure your site. Now, we're not going to dive too deeply into these. We're going to save this for an in-depth talk. But in a nutshell, you have a lot more switches at your disposal in terms to fine-tune how you want to deploy your apps now. What we also have is an updated publish dialog. And with this dialog, you're able to, for the first time, you're able to do a couple new things. You're able to actually have different profiles for how you want to publish. So you can actually publish one site into multiple different places. You're actually also able to remember the password now. And this is probably what I think is one of the best things, is that you don't have to type your password in over and over again. And to quickly give you a demonstration, we actually have a fairly elaborate setup here today. This laptop up here is actually our top-of-the-line Microsoft server. And we have all the brand new deployment tools installed in here. To note, to have this tool work, there's a small package that you actually have to have running on the server. It's sort of a web service that actually coordinates everything together. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to push the site from this machine over to this machine, and let's see how that works. We're going to be using MS Deploy as a publishing option, and our other options that we still support, if you can see here, whoops, are going to be FTP, file system, front page server extensions. Those are all still supported. But I think you're going to see that MS Deploy is actually a lot faster in what it does. You plug in the server you're on, and you plug in the application that you want to point to, give her a certificate, and we switch between 2 different profiles here. And let's try profile number 1. We're going to go ahead and publish the site out. And what you're going to see is actually deployment failed. And what the point I want to emphasize here is that now that you actually have more power to move different things around, such as your application configuration, there's actually a few more permissions that you may need on the server. So at this point, either you have a server where you have access to it, or perhaps a lot of times it's really just a few of your own boxes within your company that you actually have admin privileges on that you actually want to push to. Assuming you have privileges on that box, what we can actually do now is to be able to create a new application on that other server. We're going to take a look at this particular site here. Whoops. I think a new app 2 on the server here is supposed to be empty. Yeah. And what I'm going to do here is take a look at the publish dialog. And we're actually going to switch to the second profile. And this one actually has Vishal, my coworker's credentials, which actually always have more permissions than I do. So his permissions are actually published to the server. And all you have to do is flip the credentials, and it will actually publish the exact same thing to the server. And just double check again, we were publishing to new app 2. And as you can see, it's able to create a new app on the server here. It says production box there, but let's go ahead and republish one more time. We're going to change a web config setting here. And we're going to see it is 21. And let's see if this is able to publish up there. We can publish the debug configuration to the server. And let's go here. Publish again. I want to take a look at how quick this actually copies the entire setup. And then once you're up here, whoops, you're able to publish the files. One thing that I wanted to cover here is that we're actually we're actually doing the transforms as we go up to the server. So if you take a look at the web configuration up here, on the local host, we actually have the ability to take a look at the debug and release files. And you're actually going to be able to see that these two web configurations are actually different due to the web config transforms. So for this one, it says PDC production box. For this one, it says PDC production box. Let me actually switch it real quick and change that. So how do these things change? Well, it actually changes because of a new feature we have down here, which is the web.debug.config and with the web.release.config. And these two files contain the transformation language that we were talking about before. And the reason why you didn't see the string change from one place to another is because we actually have a transform in here that actually will take the string and modify it to whatever you want. So just to make sure at 6:23 p.m., this is the debug version. And for the release version, we're able to have that exact same transform. And at 6:24 p.m., this is the release. And let me take a quick second to look at the syntax here. The web config transformation is actually pretty simple. It looks like your web config, so that way at a glance you can take a look at how much you're changing. And basically you just actually replicate the entire file. You can copy and paste the entire thing if you want. And just add these tags right here, which you need to add a new namespace. And we have a couple different transforms. This particular one replaces all of the children of the app settings tag with anything specified underneath here, thus overriding anything you have in your existing web config. What we have here is XCT transform that removes any attributes called debug off of the compilation node off of system.web, off of configuration. So you can see these two configuration files are actually doing something different. And when we actually publish and build the site, which we can actually do here, create the package. And since we're in debug mode, you can take a look at the web config here. And you can see this is what I just updated in the debugs file. And down in the compilation section, oops. Oh, compilation is gone.
No,
Yeah, there it is. Yep. Debug is still on. And for the release version, let's go ahead and flip over to release. And let's go ahead and create the package. And this is a shortcut to actually generate, invoke the transformation. We can take a look at the release version here. You can see really quickly that this is the release version. You're able to modify the different keys. And you're able to take a look at the compilation node right here, which actually has debug equals false. Scrolling around a little bit to look for the different attributes. But to go back to the key points here, you're basically looking at a mechanism that's able to take your web config and transform it in an arbitrarily complex fashion. I've only shown you the two simplest ways of transforming these things. Vishal will actually be taking you through the full set of different transformations you can apply and how you can really take this all the way to get your site to be able to work from different locations in the exact way you want. You've also seen how the publishing mechanism is a lot faster than it was before, and it's able to copy all the different parts of your site from one place to another. All right. So to summarize here, we've shown you a lot of new things today. I want to take a recap of everything that you've seen. Design view improvements for CSS standards, but two large areas of investments in terms of making your JavaScript and your markup writing a lot easier and a lot faster with the introduction of HTML snippets and also structural selection. With IntelliSense, hopefully you guys are convinced that the new IntelliSense engine will never fail on any other files. It will give you IntelliSense on members you've never seen before, and hopefully the members that you want to see. A super consistent user experience, and it also is a lot faster to a point where you don't have to wait for it anymore. And with deployment, Microsoft has really tried to answer the question, the really tough question of how to get your app from one place to another. And we'll be covering a lot more on this, but at least you've seen how web config transformations work and the feature that we call one-click publishing, how that works. A couple more resources I wanted to point you out at. Tomorrow at 3:30 in 408A, Vishal is going to be giving a deep dive into what I just gave you a taste of in terms of Microsoft Visual Studio and how it works from a deployment standpoint. Stephen Walter, who's one of our coworkers, is going to be taking you through a walkthrough of ASP.NET and how to use jQuery with that. It's going to be a really cool session and really leveraging all the new things that we announced and also how to use jQuery with the framework. Tomorrow at 4:45, if you want to get a deeper dive into how MS Deploy works, Saad is going to be demoing a deep dive into how MS Deploy works. And this is more for the server side of things to get your ops working. Lastly, on Thursday, we have a really cool talk about ASP.NET Ajax features. And the talk, Scott Hunter earlier actually demoed for you some of the new ASP.NET Ajax features. Bertrand is going to be taking you for a deep dive on what ASP.NET Ajax is going to look like moving forward. Last but not least, we have our team blog, which I post to and all of our team members post to, and the link for that is right there. And please fill in your evals, and I'm open to any questions, and if you can please use the mics, that'd be great. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate you guys sitting through.
Hey, just one quick question.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about implementing code folding for the JavaScript?
Yeah, so the question is, are we thinking about implementing code folding, which is also known as the outlining feature in VBS? Yeah. And short answer to that is we're looking at it. We can't promise anything, but I've heard a lot of feedback on that, and we realize it's something that people want. It's not super easy to do, so yeah. Hope that answers your question.
I noticed you mentioned design time and runtime CSS style sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever considered doing design time and runtime master pages, or at least design time master pages? We dynamically associate a master page at runtime, and it would be nice to have design time too. I don't know if that was kind of in the similar vein.
Yeah, that's definitely in a similar vein. We've actually heard feedback about that too, about people wanting to switch because your master page can't be resolved at design time or whatnot. Yeah. It's actually a sister feature to the CSS. We figured the CSS was more demanded, so we wanted to do that one first. But it's definitely really good feedback, and I appreciate that.
Okay. And one last question.
Yeah.
For the MS deploy, I assume there's going to be a command line version of that?
Yes. The question is, will MS deploy have a command line variant? And there definitely will. Vishal will actually cover that in more detail. Underneath the hood is actually just running MS build, and it's just a task. And you can actually run everything outside of Visual Studio if you want. There's a lot of really cool scenarios. And stop by the talk tomorrow, and there's a whole hour worth of details there.
Thank you.
Hope that answers your question. Yeah, over here.
My question actually follows up into this. Is the deployment, can you also do this with MS Build? As in you make a deployment build, a staging build, a release build, and so on?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes. Can you also leverage the whole multiple deployment scenario with MS Build so you can provide the packages and then manually deploy it, completely transformed?
Yeah, so you want to use web config transformations without Visual Studio.
Exactly.
And just MS Build. And that will be available. And Vishal, do you have anything you want to... The question is about MS Build using web config transformations without VS. And I said that you can, so do you want to add anything else? So he'll show you how to do it tomorrow.
Thanks.
At 1:45, I believe. 3:30, PC 33 is the session number.
Thanks.
Cool, thanks. Yeah.
All right, so we have this session tomorrow, but I have another question on the same lines.
Yeah.
Hopefully a very quick one. In your example, you showed that you could replace the app settings section. Do you also have a preserve setting to preserve the app settings that are already on the production server and not overwrite them?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of different ways. You can add, you can append, you can replace, you can delete. All the different operations you can imagine are possible using that syntax. I only showed sort of the two easiest ones.
Okay.
And that will also be covered more tomorrow. We have a breakout talk, so that's why we kind of decided to cover more of it there. But stop by 3:30.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
I love being short. Hey, so you were mentioning the databases could be deployed. Well, that one of the problems was that databases could be or need to be deployed in various DLLs and GAC and registry changes, etc.
Yeah.
But I didn't see anything that seemed like it showed that as an option. So is that planned? Is it going to happen?
So we talked about database deployment, and all you got to see was really a tab in the bottom corner. That's actually hot off the presses. We're still working on it right now. And tomorrow we'll actually show a bit more of it in depth in terms of databases. But there definitely is a database deployment story as part of the entire deployment package.
Okay, and then will it report on what components, or pardon me, maybe a better question is it somewhat transactional? So if you go and you deploy, can you roll back if the deployment fails? Like I just went and made a whole bunch of GAC changes, and oops, it failed midway through.
That'll have to actually ask the MS Deploy experts. So.
Right.
But it does a lot more, and we recognize that there are some products that we will be working on. So we'll love to hear more feedback about those.
Okay, so where would I give that feedback?
Let me back it up here. So that first talk up there?
Yeah.
Tomorrow, Tuesday, 3:30 is the best place to get all our deployment questions answered.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So put that in your session schedule. Yeah.
Hey, just a quick question on the code snippets. In the interest of sharing those snippets, we have a large group of developers, and we like to share some of those things across development teams, whether it's in the same location or not. Is there any plan to have the snippet management or the snippets themselves that you create put into maybe Visual Studio or TFS or some sort of mechanism by which we could share those? Are they local just to your system?
So the question is, like, you want to share snippets, and what are the avenues you can do to share the snippets?
Yeah, basically.
I think there's a couple different levels. To answer the very basic way, what we have today is we actually have something called a VSI, and you're able to wrap a whole bunch of snippets into a zip file, basically. And you can send that around, and you can double-click on that, and it automatically installs into someone else's computer.
Okay.
It drops it into your documents directory. It doesn't make any permanent changes. And this is a great tool for if you want to share with other people. Above that, we actually don't. Ideally, there's some sort of online mechanism where you can sync to snippets or via TFS, and that's something that we barely had time to finish these features this time around. But we're definitely looking at ways to better share between different snippets.
So at this point, if you had a VSI, you could probably throw that into TFS then and just distribute that out.
Yeah, that's probably one way you can do it.
Okay.
Or you can. Yeah, or you can just put the files up there. That might be just as easy too. Authoring a VSI takes a little bit of time. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'd love to hear like your ideas in terms of what you'd like to see also. And I'll be at the lounge tomorrow under the tools, languages, and frameworks. So I'd be happy to talk to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question regarding to the designer and to type loading.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is for the big forum or if it's more a personal question. We have pretty intensive type loading things going on, type generation and so on.
Yeah.
During design time. And Visual Studio uses the same app domain, reuses the same app domain, despite rebuilds and so on, and you generate multiple types, multiple assemblies within your design environment.
Yeah, so the memory consumption goes up as you...
It's not even the memory consumption, that's the problem. The problem is, unless you use designer get type,
Yeah.
You don't even know which type you are currently loading, and you get invalid types and stuff like that.
You don't know which version you're currently loading, right?
Excuse me?
You don't know which version you're currently loading.
Exactly. And it goes even so far as when you work with generics,
Yeah.
even the native CLR doesn't know which type to bind to.
Yeah. You know what? We actually have the expert in the room there. Sorry to call you out, Joe. Joe Davis is a developer in our team that works exactly on that part. And if you can answer over the mic so they can record it. Joe, and you can actually ask the question directly to Joe later too. So.
Yeah. Why don't I talk to you about that? Because it's pretty specific and I'm going to need some details.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So your answer is Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that helps. Thanks. All right.